واللعنة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الحكيم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وإذا سمعوا ما أنزل إلى الرسول ترى أعينهم تفيض من الدمع مما عرفوا من الحق يقولون ربنا آمنا فاكتبنا مع الشاهدين. آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Your second salawat for love of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. And your loudest salawat to hasten the master of our time, Sahibul Asri wa Zaman. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بذكرنا المصائب أبا عبد الله الحسين عليه السلام. May Allah increase in our reward for the commemoration of the difficulties of Abu Abdullah. Alhamdulillah, Allah has given us the opportunity and the tawfiq to take part in the majlis of Imam al-Hussain. And this is truly an honor to have the opportunity to participate in the majlis of Imam al-Hussain. Today is our introduction to our discussion. As a tamheed, a muqaddima, an introduction, there's a few points that when we come to the majlis that we want to take advantage of and we want to receive benefit from. There are some practices that we have established as part of our traditions. There's nothing wrong with tradition and culture. These are very good things. But there are benefits associated with these actions that when we forget these actions and we forget the benefits of these traditions, we begin to question, why do we continue this practice? What's the point of this activity? And when we get to that point, it becomes difficult then for us to continue, and we lose the ghaya, the purpose of those activities. Especially in this day and age, in the environment that we live in, it's very important to be able to understand the purpose of an action. The reason being that when we came to this country, many of us sought the benefits that this country offers. One of the benefits of this country is the education it offers. The fundamental of that structure of education we saw when we differentiated between what education is offered here and what education is offered in our Eastern countries is the difference of understanding. And the difference of understanding was that in whether you're looking at Pakistan, Afghanistan, India, Iran, these countries, they had a system called ratta, memorization. They give you something, you memorize it, then you go and you sit on the test and you repeat it. The better you repeat it, the better your grade. Even till today, even in the Hausa, when you go to sit for an exam, you have to repeat the text of the book that's in the exam. And even if you understood the concept, if you didn't write what the author wrote, you didn't get the points for the result. There. Versus the education system here, your teacher tells you, I don't care if you repeat what the author wrote in the book. What I want to know is, did you understand the concept? The consequence of that education system is not just applied to work or professional lives. The consequence of that education system has been that our children have learned to ask the question, why? They want to know why. And when we can't answer the question why, the consequence of that is that the child believes there's no value to the action. There's no purpose to the action. If you tell them the way, and our master Imam Ali, Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, salli ala Muhammad. When he explains, he says, don't raise your children the way that you were raised. Certainly they are born for a different time than you. This is true. Imam Ali explains this in his wasiyah. He says, and the question in his wasiyah is whether it's written to Imam al-Hasan or it's written to Muhammad Hanafiya or to his other children, but that's not the point of our discussion today, to talk about the practicality of it. But after the Battle of Siffin, Imam Ali comes to the realization, he says, I see that my time on this earth is now limited. And there are some important things that I need to ensure that pass on to the next generation. Amongst this, and then in this letter that Imam Ali writes, he explains a number of very important wise counsels and lessons that each parent should know about when they want to raise their children, and where to put the influence and where to alleviate, give them relief, where to stress, where to take it easy, where to be kind, where to be harsh. Imam Ali gives a very good explanation in this aspect. And amongst this advice, he says, be careful that you don't raise your children the way you were raised. They were born for a different time. Meaning that when we sit down and we talk about that, oh, when I was a child, my father would say sit, and I would sit and I wouldn't get up. And these children, they don't listen. I tell them sit and they say, why? This is the conversation that we have. You say, oh, biadab, no respect. But the truth of it is that it's a consequence of the environment that we chose for them. We wanted them to have the benefits of what this environment can offer them. The consequence of that is that some factors in them will change, though we did not want them to. We want them when they go into the professional world to ask questions, be intelligent, be diligent, understand the concept. But then when it comes to our traditions, we say, shh, don't ask questions. It won't work this way. They will say that this is hypocrisy. That this is hypocrisy. I'm doing something I don't believe in, I don't understand. Which is why the tamheed, the introduction to today's conversation, is establishing what it is that we need to accomplish in these 12 nights, why it is that we build an association with these 12 nights, and what it is that we hope that will be the guidance that we receive from these 12 nights. So shortly, in 3 or 4 areas of discussion briefly, we'll start this conversation tonight. Inshallah, tomorrow night we begin our conversation, which will be a series for the next 12 nights, that talks about the characteristics of the servants of Allah. But for tonight is our introduction, our muqaddimah, our tamheed, that talks about why it is that we gather here and what it is that we hope to accomplish with these 12 nights. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. In Surah Al-Ma'idah, verse number 83, Allah says, وَإِذَا سَمِعُوا مَا أُنزِلَ إِلَى الرَّسُولِ تَرَى أَعْيُنُهُمْ تَفِيضُ مِنَ الدَّمْعِ مِمَّا عَرَفُوا مِنَ الْحَقِّ يَقُولُونَ رَبَّنَا آمَنَّا فَاكْتُبْنَا مَعَ الشَّاهِدِينَ. The literal translation of this verse talks about, and when they hear what has been sent down to the messenger, you see their eyes overflowing with tears because of what they recognize of the truth. And they say, Rabbana amanna, oh Lord, we keep faith, and write us and keep us, witness us amongst the shahideen. They say, write down for us that we are amongst the shahideen. Surah Ma'idah, verse number 83. The introduction of this verse talks about when Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, the brother of Imam Ali, was sent to Abyssinia. And at the time, to give background to this, the Muslimin, when they were minority in Mecca, they were going through severe persecution. So the Prophet took Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, the brother of Imam Ali, and made him the leader of a group and said, take all of these people and do hijrat, migrate to Abyssinia, which is a Christian kingdom, and seek the protection of the Christian king so that the polytheists of Mecca don't kill off the Muslimin. Part of the characteristic of this is understanding that Ja'far ibn Abi Talib is one of the emissaries of the Holy Prophet. All of the children of Abu Talib were those who made sacrifices and served for the sake of Islam, including Ja'far. Ja'far was one of the select few who had a great status and was beloved to the Holy Prophet, truly beloved to the Holy Prophet for his sacrifices and his efforts. And which is why when he was sent to the kingdom of Abyssinia, one of the things that happened there was that the polytheists of Mecca followed the Muslimin, and they tried to get the king, Najashi, to remove these people and excommunicate them from his country and send them back to Mecca so that they could be punished and persecuted. And a court case was brought in front of Najashi the king, where the people of Mecca came and they claimed that they said that these people they're baghi, they're enemies of the state, they're evil, they're all these bad things, and they've run away from punishment to seek asylum here, and you should send them back to us. Ja'far bin Abi Talib came and he explained that no, we're a minority faith group who believes in the one true God, and these polytheists are persecuting us for this. And the consequence of this was that the polytheists of Makkah said that, see, they don't even believe in Nabi Isa alayhi salam. They don't believe in the authority of Christ. They're enemies of you. In consequence to that, the king Najashi said to Ja'far bin Abi Talib, tell me, what does your Quran say about Isa? And Hazrat Ja'far ibn Abi Talib recited the verses of Surah Maryam that talk about Prophet Isa. As he recited these verses, Najashi began to cry. This verse of the Quran, Surah Ma'idah, the 5th surah of the Holy Quran, verse number 83, talks about how when Najashi heard the verses of the Quran, he began to weep. His eyes became tearful from recognizing the truth of the Holy Quran. And he said, "O Lord, we keep faith. Count us amongst those who bear witness to your message." In Tafsir Qummi, which is one of the oldest tafsirs that we possess, the Mu'allif writes that this was the showing at which Najashi accepted Islam. But he didn't do it openly, but he was one who was a witness to Islam and accepted Islam. By the structure of this verse, we can draw this conclusion. It's one of the authentic proofs of this. The point in our conversation about why we're mentioning Najashi, why we're mentioning these verses of the Quran, is that the true heart that accepts the true message of Islam and that which invites to the truth is something that invokes the emotion. Something that comes from the pure source of Allah, that is not mukhallat, mixed with the affairs of this world and the problems and the difficulties of this life, is something that brings us back to Allah and our heart responds to it. When we find ourselves accompanied by the truth, it's not unusual that that truth should bring us the desire to be closer to Allah and that we have a similar reaction to Him as well too. Our goal is now, how do we find this similar reaction? Where do we go to learn, and how do we build that relationship with the truth in such a way that we too are those who say to Allah, Rabbana katabna ma'a shahidin, write us amongst those who bear witness. This majlis of Imam al-Hussain is something that is now a tradition of approximately 1400 years. It has continued. And it has been a source by which we attach ourselves to the message of Abu Abdullah and build a relationship to understand what it is that we have to accomplish. Our goal, when we look at this majlis, is what do we need to accomplish with it to make sure that it brings us to the truth and guidance. First and foremost is the practical aspects of a majlis. Khususan in these days, especially in these days, one of the three major areas that we need to ensure that our majlis addresses is to ensure that there is safety for the participants. Now it happens that, for example, I may feel confident that I have no need of these precautions. It may happen that I feel comfortable that I am not one who will suffer these difficulties. But when, for example, we talk about our community, we don't make decisions for our community based upon individual benefits. We base our decisions for the community on collective benefit. I'll give you an example. There's a stop sign down the road. Maybe there is one. I don't know. I'm pointing in that direction. Now you say, I know this area very well. I know when cars are coming. I can identify when cars are coming. I don't need to stop at this stop sign. We would say, no, you may not need to stop at this stop sign, but you don't know if the other person will stop here. Not just that. We say the purpose of the stop sign is to protect the community. That all of the people who live in this area, they have a sense of security that a rule has been put into place and everyone follows that rule. When we look at it, I may say that I personally don't need to follow the stop sign. However, I know that the entire community relies on the stop sign to know that there is security and aman, that there is peace and that we know this is there. Same is true with every single traffic light that you see. Now, I may be capable of weaving through traffic, or I may be capable of deciding that, oh, okay, there's no one coming, let me go. But as a community, we know that the rules of society would become harmful to everyone if we didn't follow these rules for the social benefit and community benefit. The same is true of our current situation. When I look at the rules and regulations that are established by my community center, that are established by my masjid, that are put in place for the protection of the people who attend the majlis, the question I need to ask is not, do I need to follow this rule? Or do I feel secure without this rule? The question is that this rule serves the community, therefore I follow the guidelines of the community. And I follow the instructions of the community. Which is why that allows our community to continue its ability to utilize our resources and to establish an environment in which we learn and all communally benefit from. Not my individual benefit, but the group benefit. The second point that we take a look at when we look at the structure of the majlis and the idea of the benefit from the majlis is the idea that this majlis, there is no one person who is in charge of the majlis and only their obligation fits here. When we come to a majlis, we are the guest of Aba Abdullah. This majlis was not our desire for it to be created, but truly it was the desire or the satisfaction of the desire of his mother, Sayyidah Fatima Zahra, salamullahi alayha. Therefore, truly, each of us is a guest in this environment. But the attendance in a majlis of Imam al-Hussain is something that I may do voluntarily and I may enjoy voluntarily. But can you imagine the pleasure of that majlis when I serve on behalf of the maker of the majlis? To participate and to serve in a majlis is one of those opportunities that we uniquely have, that the one on behalf of whom you stand for in this majlis is the ma'soom who wanted the majlis. It's not a little matter. To the extent we see the narrations of our Holy Prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we explained, he said, the serving of a mu'min who serves his brother is something so beloved to Allah that for every mu'min that you serve, Allah creates for you a servant in heaven whose responsibility is to serve you. Meaning this action of serving for our community is something very beloved in the eyes of Allah. That if we should gather in one location, we should take the advantage of having this opportunity and look at it as a blessing. That each of us who comes to this majlis, each of us who has the opportunity to attend the majlis, has the choice. I'm either the guest or I'm the host. And while the guest is always welcome and the guest will always be treated well, but imagine the opportunity to be the host on behalf of Ahlul Bayt. It's an honor. It's a unique opportunity. Which is why when we come here, each of us comes with the intention, this is my majlis. I am the holder of this majlis. I am the one who continues the message of Imam Hussain. I am the one who ensures that this continues on such that I may be written amongst those who are them that represented Ahlul Bayt. It's a unique opportunity that when we come to a majlis, we don't look at it as coming to an event other than our own. It is our event and our responsibility. The third point of the practicality of a majlis is when we look at the verses of Surah A'la, the 87th verse of the 87th surah of the Holy Quran, where Allah says, فَذَكِّرْ إِن نَفَعَتِ الذِّكْرَى سَيَذَّكَّرُ مَن يَخْشَى. Allah says, remind the one who will take admonishment. Certainly the one who takes admonishment, who takes the reminder, benefits from it. وَيَتَجَنَّبُهَا الْأَشْقَى. And the one who avoids it is certainly at a loss, is a shaqi. It's come by the influence of the culture and the society that we live in, that we measure things in their entertainment value. We look at things and we want to be entertained and we say, is this interesting? Is it entertaining? It's not fun. I don't enjoy it. However, the purpose of this majlis is not entertainment, but rather it is to be that reminder for us that brings us back to the path of Allah and separates us from this dunya and attaches us to Ahlul Bayt. And Allah is the one who says, and remind for those who will take admonishment, remind for those who will accept the reminder. Our goal when we look at this majlis in a practical sense is to see a majlis as a place of remembering the message of Allah, separating ourselves from this world and its material influences and focusing once again upon what it is that Allah wants from us. If we can find a majlis that though it may not be entertaining, but at the conclusion of that majlis, I feel and I open the door to myself that now I am moving towards improvement of myself, or I am remembering what it is that Allah wants from me. Sallu ala Muhammad. I was realizing gradually we were getting lower, so I was like, let's try again. Let's connect again. If this majlis becomes a reminder for me, then the majlis is successful. But the point of a reminder is not that the person chases you down and shakes your shoulder and says, hey, remember. It's that I come to the majlis looking for the reminder. What have I forgotten? What am I missing? I want to be reminded, therefore I come looking for what will remind me. We have to be very careful we don't fall into looking at a majlis like media. Whether it's social media, whether it's TV, whether it's films, these are things for enjoyment. They're a pastime. No one sits at the end and says, did you become a better person from watching this? Was it something that will change your life forever? No, as a matter of fact, if someone was to say after watching a movie, it changed my life forever, we say, Baba, you're going a little overboard, huh? It's a little extreme. But a majlis on the other side of that is something that I should feel brings change in me, makes me a better person. It's something that I came to learn from or benefit from or correct in myself, and I achieved the goal that I came to attend. This is how we know that our majlis is successful. Am I someone who judges my majlis based on, those 40 minutes were very painful, huh? It was very hard to stay awake. No, this isn't a show. We didn't come here to put on a show. We came here to attach ourselves to the message of Allah. We came to separate from dunya and everything that is outside that is trying to take us away from Allah and attach ourselves back to Allah. So now, the next part, once we understand what we want to achieve, is how do we achieve this? What do we have to do to accomplish these goals? And again, we'll mention it in 3 points. The first of which is when you want to achieve something with a majlis, whether it's home, because of the circumstance many people are at home, or it's here, there are a few points that we have to make. One is removing the distractions that keep us from staying focused. Our attention span, it used to be said that the attention span of a normal person is approximately 7 minutes. And every 7 minutes, you get distracted for up to 30 seconds, minute or more, and then if something can pull you back, it brings you back. Unfortunately, with the advent of social media, I believe that focus time has decreased further. And what happens is these devices, they're constantly buzzing, ringing, ticking to get our attention and pull us away from the topic of our discussion. And each of us finds ourselves being distracted. Now, whether it's a cell phone, whether it's other notifications, other devices, it's not just in a majlis that these become a distraction, but in everything. Think to yourself, and don't tell anyone, I've been praying and my phone rang. It buzzed. It made the sound that I have a notification. What happens to me in that salat? I start thinking about who's messaging me, who's calling me. Maybe I was waiting for someone to call, they're calling now. Maybe that message I was waiting for has come now. The distraction process that begins in this way separates us from what we were trying to achieve and takes our attention far away from our goal. Which is why these devices, these devices are distractions. When I have something that I need to achieve that's important, I separate these things from myself. I make sure that they don't have the ability to influence my environment. And the first and foremost place where our concentration needs to be is in ibadat of Allah. And then after that, where there is a benefit. When we say that this majlis is a reminder, what I need to be reminded about, is it the most important thing I need to achieve now? If so, I need to remove the distractions and put them away. I need to make sure that there is nothing that will attempt to take me away from something that is beneficial. If I told you that at the end of this lecture, everyone who can answer 5 questions will be given $1 million, no questions asked. I'm sorry, that's not going to happen. Please don't quote me on that. I mean, it'll do great things for attendance if we say that, but how many of us would look at our phone with pleasure when it rang during that majlis? Everyone would be frustrated. Like, shh, this is more important than anything that comes in here. Therefore, that idea of removing distractions is the first thing. When I want something to benefit me and I need something, the first thing I want to do is remove distractions from me. Get them out, get them away, so that my goal can be achieved and something doesn't stop me from achieving my goal. And when we're sitting here, it may be the devices, it may be neighbors, it could be anything. But at home, it's even worse. At home, it's very difficult. Because if I'm watching on the TV or I'm watching on my phone and then a notification comes, something else shows up, someone asks me a question, we have to learn first and foremost that if we want to take the benefits of a majlis, we have to remove the distractions that are there to separate us from the majlis. The second point is creating the environment. And this is more so, for example, in our homes. That in our home, we make sure that our distractions are minimized as much as possible. I don't think it really matters if it goes down. We're okay. I think we're okay because you can still hear me. No problems, right? Is the environment. When we come to a majlis physically, we leave the comforts of our home, our bed, our couch, and we come to a place that has been prepared. Whether it's by hanging black cloth, whether it's by inviting a speaker, whether it's by the way that we dress and we change, we make sure that the environment has changed to indicate that now I'm in a different place with a different goal. The same is true in our house. If it happens that I don't have the ability to come to the majlis, and I want to get the benefits of the majlis, and I want to continue the tradition and the habit that it doesn't break, create the environment. Create the environment. Lay out black cloth in your house. Create a space that is dedicated to this purpose. I should not treat the majlis the way I treat a TV show. It is not okay that if here we don't have reclining couches for me to sit on to listen to a majlis, then at home I should create the same environment. Not sitting on my couch or my bed, not leaning back and crossing my ankles and possibly falling asleep as the Maulana gets boring and boring and boring. The same is true for my children. That especially in this country and this culture where outside the world doesn't change when Muharram comes, the world is still the same. Nothing changed outside. Then I need to make changes in my house to show that this is something important and special that needs to be paid attention to. So that my children learn that this isn't something I take lightly. This isn't a joke. Otherwise, the same consequence will happen. You tell me it's important, but you don't show me it's important. You tell me I need to pay attention, but you don't show me how I need to pay attention. This process of education requires commitment, not simply from one person who comes and presents, but from every person who participates. And that environment is very important. Many of us, when we think back to our childhood, we remember how our neighborhoods, our houses, our community would change at the advent of Muharram. The flags would be put out, the clothing would change, the food would change, the habits would change, the majalis would be constantly going on. If our community and our environment isn't doing it, we have to do it to make sure that this is something that's important in our families. The third part of extracting the benefit, if we call this a reminder is not satisfied with one iteration. A reminder needs takrar, repetition. And that repetition comes in the form of discussing and talking about it. Whether it's with our spouse, our siblings, our children. When you finish a majlis, when you finish listening to a lecture, try and repeat the lecture's contents to someone else who either listened to it or didn't listen to it. Both are important. If someone else has also listened to the lecture, the benefit you have, if I missed something, they'll be able to remind me. If I paid attention to a particular point and that became the focal point of my attention, Maybe somebody who was sitting in the same majlis was attracted to a different point, and when we sit together, we introduce different ways of viewing this discussion. If I sit with someone who wasn't in the majlis, and I begin the process of trying to recap the majlis, I will learn about myself. How well do I pay attention and how well do I communicate? Especially for our youth, the aspect of teaching them to communicate and be able to explain complex ideas is something that doesn't happen naturally for most people. It requires effort. And instead of placing the entire effort on, for example, the education system, I take that responsibility that when I leave, I say, what did you understand? What did you learn? What was something you enjoyed? What was something that was different that you didn't hear before? And this will open a conversation in multiple fields. One field is I'll see, does my child pay attention when he's in a majlis or not? Another aspect, it will start to reveal my child's personality to me. What things interested them? What are they paying attention to? Do they like history? Do they like law? Do they like different discussions? By looking at these different aspects and having this conversation, things that may be hidden from me about the person I'm speaking to will become evident. I learn about them. And especially with our children today, where it comes an age where they learn not to communicate with their parents, this becomes a tool then to open the door of communication and facilitate. How do I talk about Islam in my house? You see, money is something we talk about in our house because it's a prevalent issue that impacts day-to-day decisions and choices. My children want something, we have to buy something, they need to appreciate the value of money. I need to educate them how to use money. I need to talk about these things. But Islam is something, and faith is something that in our culture, because faith has been separated from the rest of life, it's rare that we have the opportunity to talk about it. And it winds up being that many children don't talk about faith until someone dies. And then it's a question, what do I do now? How do I help the person who left me now? What are my obligations now? What should I be doing? What's happening to them? Where am I supposed to go? Because faith was absent from the conversation. When something bad happened, now the question is, what does faith do for me? How can I use it? Which means that now is the time to have these conversations and these introductions and to talk about it so that faith doesn't become something relegated to difficulties and problems and death, but is a part of my life. It used to be that there are 2 points in which people paid attention to faith: marriage and death. Here, marriage has nothing to do with Islam anymore. Maulana, we need him for 15 minutes. We'll tell him when to come in. Everybody turn everything off, cover your heads. Once he leaves, we'll go back to normal. This is why it requires effort. Islam is your fundamental of your lifestyle. To make it a part of our lifestyle here where our culture doesn't support Islam, we have to exert the effort. We have to take the tools that we have and make them work for us to ensure that Islam lives on. Now, how do we measure the success of these efforts? If you guys are still with me, we still have some time? Okay, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. We'll mention this briefly and move on, inshallah, and end our discussion. How do we measure success of this majlis? One aspect, and an important aspect of this majlis, is the desire to change that comes in a person. The desire to be a better person. When we look at the revolution of Abu Abdullah and we try to understand what was this revolution and to know that this revolution lives on. Inna liqatli waladi al-Hussain hararatun fi qulub al-mu'minin lan tabriduha abada. Where our Prophet says that certainly for the killing of Abu Abdullah, there is a fire in the hearts of mu'mineen that never goes out, that will never go out. Speaks to the idea that this revolution of Imam Hussain isn't something that ended 1400 years ago. The idea, it's the simple concept that even if we were to take a look and look at it as a historical fact, that 72 people were unjustly killed in a desert in the middle of Iraq. And because of that, Over 1,000 years later, people are still recounting and attaching themselves to that message. Tells you that this was not a material fight, but that this was one that induced the truth and invited us to the aspect of loving Allah. The same way that we talk about Najashi in the verse of Surah Ma'idah, that when he hears the revelation of Quran, swears that this is the truth and says, write us amongst those who bore witness to this truth. The message of Imam al-Hussein, as it entails the truth and it is completeness of truth, it is something that invites us that we want to be part of it and we want to change for that improvement. And one of the ways that that happens is this crying for Imam Hussein. This crying for Imam Hussein is very important. We see when Imam Ali explains, he says, tears do not dry up except for the hardening of hearts, and hearts do not harden except for the excessiveness of sin. Within Madhab Ja'fari, within this love of Ahlul Bayt, there is this 12-day cycle that begins the process of cleansing your heart, so that your heart softens. We wash away the sins to bring the tears back to our eyes. It's the miracle of this majlis, that when you cry for Imam al-Hussein, it makes you want to be a better person. That's the revolution of Abu Abdullah still in your heart, still alive today. And this wasn't a revolution that began now. No. This majlis, this weeping for Imam al-Hussein, this attachment to the love of Abu Abdullah is something that began from when Adam alayhi salam began. And Adam said that on the throne of Allah, I saw these 5 names. Oh Jibreel, when I say these names, my heart is pleased, but when I mention the name of Hussein, my heart is sorrowful. And Jibreel revealed to him and he explained to him and he said that this is your son, O Adam, who will be killed thirsty and hungry on the path of truth against injustice and evil. When Zakaria alayhi salam wanted to know, oh Allah, teach me a dua that when I invoke by this dua, you answer my prayers. Allah sent Jibreel, oh Zakaria, invoke me by the names of Muhammad, Ali, Fatima, Hassan and Hussein. Zakaria made dua, he said the same as Adam said. He said, oh Jibreel, ask Allah, why is it when I say the name of Hussein, I want to cry? My heart is sad. Jibreel came and taught him the start of the Surah Maryam, Kaf, Ha, Ya, Ain, Sa'ad. Kaf, O Zakaria, for Karbala, where Hussein will be killed. Ha, for the Halakat al-Hussein that will take place in this land. Ya, for the Yazid who will be the enemy who will be responsible for the killing of Hussein and his children. Ain, for his atash and his thirst that he and his children will experience. And Sa'd, for the sabr that he will display. He said, Zakaria, upon hearing this, began to weep. He said, will Allah certainly kill the beloved of Muhammad? Will the beloved of Muhammad certainly be lost in this way? Zakaria made dua. He said, oh Allah, give me a son that I will love the way Muhammad will love Hussein. And let me present the sacrifice before you, O Allah, the way Hussein's sacrifice will be presented from Muhammad. Zakaria, we see in Surah Maryam, is blessed with Yahya. Yahya's shahadat in the world is second only to that of Abu Abdullah. Allah fulfilled and answered the request of Zakaria and gave him a son whom he loved and was sacrificed in this way. But oh Zakaria, your son Yahya was sacrificed. But did you give an Asghar like Abu Abdullah did? Did you give an Akbar like Abu Abdullah did? Was your entire family and the lineage of Rasulullah wiped from the earth in this way? That they said that the horses played on the chest of Abu Abdullah? Were your daughters forced to witness their brothers and their children lying in the field of Karbala under the open sun? Oh Zakaria, your sacrifice of Yahya was great, but the sacrifice of Hussein is the one that's made Rasulullah cry. That Rasulullah would sit and weep, and Fatima and Ali would ask, Mada yubtika ya Rasulullah, what made you cry, O Prophet of Allah? And Rasulullah would kiss the neck of Abu Abdullah and say, a day will come where this Hussein of mine will be killed by the enemy. Zahra asked, oh father, will you be with Hussein? Said, no, I won't be. Will his father Ali be with Hussein? No, he won't be. Will I be with my son Hussein? No, Zahra, you won't. His brother Hassan? No, no one will be with Hussein. Hussein mata atshanan. He will be killed thirsty. Gharib, as a stranger in a strange land. Wahida farida, that he will be alone and no one will be there to support him. Abu Abdullah, Rasulullah cried for you. Amir al-Mu'mineen, when he passed the lands of Karbala, they said, we saw Amir al-Mu'mineen fall from his horse, place his cheeks on the ground and weep. This is where their camels will rest. This is where their tents will be. This is where Hussein will be killed alone. We saw Imam Zainul Abidin after the Waqi of Karbala for 30 years, they said. Zainul Abidin, when he would open his fast, bread and water will be placed in front of him. Ali ibn al-Hussein, Sayyid al-Sajidin, Baba, you were killed thirsty and hungry. How can this son of yours eat today? When a sheep would be slaughtered, Zainul Abidin would say, did you give it water? They would say, your prophet, your grandfather, the prophet, taught us never slaughter an animal that you have not given to water first. Zainul Abidin turns to Karbala, Baba, they treat this sheep better than they treated you. Ja'far as-Sadiq would hold majlis in his house. This is where you learn to cry. He would hold majlis in his house, and when the khatib would begin to recite the masa'ib, Ja'far as-Sadiq would cry. His children would cry. The women would cry. The khatib would become embarrassed, and Imam Sadiq would say, why did you stop? We want to cry. If you make 100 people cry, I guarantee you Jannah. Make 10 people, make one. Cry yourself, and Allah will give you Jannah for Abu Abdullah. Imam Rada is the one who in the court of Ma'mun, when poetry of Abu Abdullah is recited, that if Fatima were to see Hussein alone, killed by the side of the Furat, they said Imam Rada would fall from his chair and say, repeat the line. The line would be repeated, he would fall again. Again they would say, Ibn Rasulullah, why do you fall? He says, it is as if I see my mother Zahra looking at Abu Abdullah, striking her cheeks in sorrow over the sacrifice of her son. Imam Zaman is the one who says himself, I cry tears of blood for you, Abu Abdullah. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون ندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم يا الله.